In our last episode on the history of the Ottoman Empire, we covered the origins of the House of Osman and the establishment of the Ottoman Beylik on territory won at the expense of the declining Byzantine Empire. However, this was far from the end of Osmanli ambitions. In this episode, we will look at how Osman Gazi and his successors transitioned the Ottoman state from being a minor Turkic statelet on the outskirts of Anatolia to a major up-and-coming regional power poised to dominate its neighbours. For us, it's not empires we want to build, but our own world. Digitally, that is. Everyone has a game world they wish they could make, and it's now easier to start than ever with this video's sponsor, Yahaha. This is a new creation platform for building online 3D worlds, and while normally that's extremely hard to do, Yahaha offers a way to get into it with no coding experience at all, and all for free. They provide the assets, the code, the game mechanics, everything you need, so you can do the best part of all, building your world and deciding what people can do in it. You've probably had ideas for great games countless times, but it's one medium that takes extreme dedication to make even the smallest work. Now take your idea and see it realized in Yahaha right away. It even stores the assets themselves on cloud servers, so you don't clog up your computer with the development process. And when you have something to show the world, you can one-click publish it to the Yahaha network, a cross-platform service that lets PC and mobile users discover and play your games. That of course means that you can also go in and check out worlds people have already made for inspiration or just some easy multiplayer fun. You can invite your friends to hang out or meet new ones at any time in Yahaha's 3D spaces and communities. So give that game you've always been thinking about a chance to become real. You can get in on this for free right now by joining the Early Access program. Just use our link in the description. After securing victories at the battles of Bafeus and Dimbos, the Ottoman state under Osman Gazi was poised to follow up their successes with the eventual conquest of Byzantine Bithynia. Within only 2 decades, the Ottoman Beylik had transformed from a tiny territorial pocket of 2 minor villages to a realm of a few dozen towns and major castles. This swift acquisition of new land from the Byzantines would result in a steady migration of Turkic peoples from central Anatolia into the Ottoman Beylik, bolstering Osman's military and economic capacities to wage wars against his infidel neighbours up north. Further Turkic migration into Ottoman lands would increase in scale during the first decade of the 14th century, as the Sultanate of Rum would collapse after years of internal struggles, leaving central Anatolia in a state of social and political unrest between the newly established beyliks in the region. Meanwhile, with the last of his Anatolian holdings at risk of falling to the various Muslim powers of the region after the battles of Bafeus and Dimbos, Andronikos II began searching for outside help to fend off the Turkic incursions into his lands. The Roman Emperor would first send letters to Mahmud Ghazan of the Ilkhanate, in the hopes of convincing the Mongol ruler to reassert Mongol power in Anatolia after the fall of the Sultanate of Rum. However, with the major Mongol defeat against the Mamluks during the Battle of Marj al-Safar, and the further decentralization of Mongol domains in the Middle East, talks between the Byzantines and the Ilkhanate failed to achieve any results. Andronikos II would then turn to the Great Catalan Company, a mercenary group from Western Europe, famous for their military exploits in the hilly ranges of Spain and Sicily. Accepting the call for help, the 8,000-strong Catalan Company would arrive in Constantinople at the start of 1303. In an act to bolster morale and loyalty amongst the Catalans, the Italian commander of the mercenary group, Roger de Flor, would be given the coveted imperial title of Megas Dux, and would be promised the emperor's niece in the hopes for a successful military campaign. However, the Catalans would also prove ineffective for the Byzantine Empire, as the mercenary company, instead of focusing on reconquering Byzantine lands in western Anatolia, indiscriminately plundered the peoples of the countryside, regardless of their religious affiliation, for their own gain, thus alienating the remaining Christian population in the region from Byzantine rule. Gaining nothing from his expensive gamble to retake his Anatolian holdings, Andronikos II, in a disastrous move, would murder Roger de Flor during a banquet, which would result in a bloody 2-year war between imperial forces and the Catalans in Thrace. While the Catalans had been marauding in western Anatolia, The Ottomans were forced to withdraw from their blockades of Prusa and Nicaea. But now that the Latin mercenaries had turned upon their former employers, Osman Gazi could resume conducting major raids into Byzantine Bithynia. During this period, the towns of Hamankaya, Geve, Mudanya, Andranos, Yalova, and Akyezi were slowly incorporated into the Ottoman Beylik, cutting the Byzantines off from their key cities of Prusa and Nicaea. It was also during this period in which Byzantine imperial authority in western Anatolia became non-existent, as local Turkic beyliks in the region began annexing such Byzantine towns as Ephesus in 1308, Smyrna in 1310, and Magnesia in 1313. Only the town of Philadelphia would remain in Byzantine hands, as the rest of western Anatolia would swiftly fall into Muslim rule. As a result of the rapid disintegration of Byzantine power in Anatolia and the inept rule of Andronikos II, during the year 1321, a new round of Byzantine civil wars would erupt between the emperor and his usurper grandson Andronikos III. Wanting to take advantage of Byzantine civil unrest, the now 60-year-old Osman began his final preparations for his long-awaited siege on Prusa. Lacking the siege equipment to seize the city, Osman would instead order the construction of two major forts around Prusa to oversee the city's blockade. Upon the construction of the forts, a 10,000-strong Ottoman garrison, led by Osman's son Orhan Gazi, was installed, thus cutting off Prusa from the rest of the world. As the Byzantine civil war raged on in Thrace between members of the Palaiologos dynasty, Prusa was left at the mercy of Osman and his armies. After many years of withstanding the Ottoman army at his gates, on April 6 of 1326, the governor of Prusa would officially surrender the city to Orhan after seeing that no reinforcements from Constantinople were coming to their aid. The city of Prusa would be the first major walled city to come under Ottoman rule, effectively doubling the wealth and population of the Beylik overnight. However, the first leader of the Ottomans would not live to see the conquest of Prusa, as he would die shortly before the conclusion of the siege. Osman Gazi, who had fought the Byzantines for more than 40 years and won countless victories for his Beylik, only left a horse, a couple of oxen, and a few flocks of sheep to his name. Unlike other Turkic warlords who hoarded their wealth, Osman Gazi, according to traditional chronicles, spent all his wealth on his subjects, thus making him very popular with the local Muslim and Christian populace of Bithynia. In the centuries after his death, Osman Gazi would be regarded as the ideal sultan, in which all future Ottoman sultans tried to replicate his reputation as a brave and just leader. Every Ottoman leader from then onwards would carry the sword of Osman during their enthronement ceremony, as a way to proclaim their reign to be noble and just like the humble founder of the empire. Upon the conquest of Prusa, Osman's body would be laid to rest within the walls of the city, a wish that he made to his son Orhan during the beginning of the siege. After its capture, Prusa, thereafter known as Bursa, became the new capital of the Ottoman Beylik. Shortly after this, an issue of succession sprung up between the two sons of Osman. According to a more traditional rendering of events, the more martially experienced Orhan and more diplomatically inclined Alaeddin agreed on a political agreement in which the former would become the new Bey of the Ottomans, while the latter would be given the new political position of Grand Vizier. This political partnership would prove vital for future Ottoman statecraft, as when Orhan was off on military campaigns conquering new lands, Alaeddin would oversee running the daily domestic matters of the state from Bursa. In the few years after the conquest of Bursa, the new leader of the Ottomans would launch a military campaign into Byzantine Bithynia, reaching as far as the village of Idos, thereby cutting off Constantinople from the major city of Nicomedia. By 1328, Nicaea would once again be put under a siege led by Orhan and his eldest son Suleiman Pasha. That same year, the 7-year Byzantine civil war would end, and a new emperor, Andronikos III, would unite the Byzantine realm after defeating his grandfather and forcing him to retire to a monastery. The new and untested emperor would start his reign off by ordering an official imperial campaign to retake lost lands in Bithynia and relieve the blockade of Nicaea. With the support of his grand domestic and close friend, John Kantakouzenos, Andronikos III was able to fund and muster around 4,000 infantry for his new Grand Anatolian campaign. The plan for the first portion of the campaign was for imperial forces to cross into Anatolia via the Bosporus, force march to Nicomedia, resupply and gather more forces in that city, then march on Nicaea to lift the Ottoman blockade. If all went well and Nicaea was relieved from Ottoman forces, the emperor would then conduct the slow process of pushing back the Ottomans from Bithynia and re-establishing Byzantine rule in the region. As the Byzantines were preparing for their crossing to Anatolia, Orhan, who was still personally leading the blockade on Nicaea, heard the news of the incoming Byzantine military campaign and withdrew most of his besieging forces to meet the Byzantine host before they could regroup in Nicomedia. In the June of 1329, Andronikos III and his army would cross into Anatolia. However, after only 3 days of marching along the shore of the Gulf of Nicomedia, the imperial forces would meet an Ottoman host of 8,000, led by Orhan himself, near modern-day Maltepe, blocking the main road to Nicomedia. With the Ottomans being stationed on a nearby hill and having twice the manpower compared to his imperial forces, conditions were far from favourable for Andronikos III. However, on the 10th of June, the Byzantine emperor would challenge the Ottoman host by deploying his men for battle just below the main Ottoman hill. As the Byzantine army was deploying for battle, 300 Ottoman mounted archers rode down the hill, beginning to harass the Byzantines with arrow fire. Being undeterred by the missiles from above, imperial forces made their way up the hill in a tight formation, even managing to drive back 2 waves of Ottoman assaults down the hill. As day turned into night, and seeing that Ottoman assaults down the hill were not ceasing anytime soon, the Byzantine army began to withdraw back to their camp in order to conduct an orderly retreat in the morning back to Constantinople. However, during this withdrawal, Ottoman cavalry had managed to position itself at the rear of the Byzantine army and proceeded to charge at the now exposed flanks of the imperial bodyguard of Andronikos III, thus wounding the emperor. As panic arose within the Byzantine ranks due to the unexpected attack, the rumour of the emperor being slain on the battlefield began to be spread around by the rank-and-file men of the Byzantine army, an army that was starting to lose its battle cohesion after being exhausted by multiple hours of combat with Orhan's host. As Andronikos III was stretchered off the battlefield alongside his imperial entourage, the morale-depleted Byzantine army scattered in the plain below the main Ottoman hill. Throughout the night into the following morning, Ottoman Akinji horsemen picked off the remaining routing imperial forces, thus ending the engagement in an Ottoman victory. The Battle of Pelekanon would be the first direct encounter between the heads of state of the Byzantine and Ottoman empires. With the Byzantine relief army being destroyed during the battle, Nicomedia and Nicaea were on their own against Orhan and his besieging forces. After Pelekanon, Andronikos III would officially declare a policy of containment when it came to the Turks of Anatolia, thus ending more than 1,000 years of the Roman military presence in Anatolia. Within 3 years of the battle, Nicaea would surrender to Orhan, and Nicomedia would follow soon after in 1337. A vast majority of Bithynia was now under Ottoman control, with the exception of a few villages and settlements alongside the Bosporus Strait. While Orhan was out conquering towns and cities for the Ottoman Beylik, Alaeddin Pasha from the new capital of Bursa began a series of political and military reforms in order to better legitimize Ottoman power in the region. The Grand Vizier would first establish an Ottoman monetary system in which silver coins were stamped with Orhan's name, thus legitimizing the Ottoman Bey as a proper Turkic ruler in the region. Secondly, a new imperial dress code was adopted for governmental and military workers within the Beylik, as a way to emulate the Seljuk royal court of old. Lastly, a standing army of salaried soldiers was established, in the form of the Yaya and Muslim military corps. However, many Muslim Turkomans still preferred being granted land fiefdoms, called timars, by the Ottoman government instead. No doubt Alaeddin Pasha had many more reforms planned, but sometime during the conclusion of the siege of Nicaea, he would fall ill and die in Bursa after years of loyally serving as his brother's right-hand man. Back in the Byzantine Empire, the military and political situation would only get worse, as Andronikos III would be sucked into a three-way struggle in the Balkans between the Second Bulgarian Empire and the emerging powerhouse that was the Kingdom of Serbia. During these inter-Christian conflicts in the summer of 1341, Andronikos III would suddenly fall ill with malaria and die, leaving the imperial throne to his 9-year-old son, John V Palaiologos. A regency was immediately established between the former emperor's confidant, John Kantakouzenos, Empress Dowager Anna of Savoy, and ecumenical patriarch John XIV Kalekes of Constantinople. However, when Kantakouzenos left the capital to fend off a Serbian invasion in the Balkans, the latter two regents would conduct a palace coup and named Kantakouzenos and his supporters as enemies of the state. What followed was a 6-year bloody civil war, which would see Byzantine society fracture in two, as the urban populace of the empire supported John V, while the rural lands supported Kantakouzenos. Having lost all support in the major cities of Thrace, with the exception of Didymateiko and desertions plaguing his armies, Kantakouzenos would turn to the Turks of Anatolia to bolster his ranks. The Byzantine magnate would first employ the services of Amur the Lion of the Idanids. However, the Turkic warlord would withdraw from the civil war when Crusader forces from Europe invaded his Beylik in 1343. Kantakouzenos would then turn to the Ottoman and Saracen Beyliks for assistance, even offering the Ottoman Bey his eldest daughter's hand in marriage to solidify the alliance between their two states. Accepting the offer in a lavish ceremony in the town of Salimbria, Orhan Gazi and Theodora Kantakouzene would be married in front of Kantakouzenos' family, thus making the Bey of the Ottomans the son-in-law to the Byzantine magnate. With the marriage solidified and a couple of thousand Ottoman soldiers being ferried into Byzantine Thrace, Kantakouzenos would effectively change the tides of the war in his favour, and by 1347 he would seize Constantinople and proclaim himself as senior co-emperor to John V. Even though the civil war was now over, Byzantine territory in the Balkans had been carved up severely by the newly formed Serbian Empire under Emperor Stefan Uroš IV Dušan and the Second Bulgarian Empire. In addition to major territorial losses, the Byzantine countryside of Thrace was thoroughly pillaged by Turkic mercenary soldiers during the war, leaving the empire in a state of economic and social crisis. While the Byzantine Empire was in disarray, Orhan Gazi, during the year 1345, would take advantage of another neighbouring civil war, this time in the Karasid Beylik. A bloody succession war between the sons of the former Bey in the region had broke out, leading to an Ottoman military intervention by Orhan and his son Suleiman Pasha on the basis of re-establishing peace within a fellow Muslim nation. However, by the end of the conflict, the sons of the former Karasid Bey would be put under Ottoman house arrest, and the Beylik would be formally annexed into the Ottoman realm a few years later. The large Karasid navy, famous for its piratical exploits on the Aegean and its many talented Turkic soldiers and generals, would now be under the service of Orhan and his successors. Back in the Byzantine Empire, the dual rule between John V Palaiologos and John VI Kantakouzenos had become untenable, as the two rulers and their respective factions butted heads in the governance of the state. With the imperial armies in shambles, domestic economy shattered, and the arrival of the Black Death from Crimea, tensions within Constantinople were at a political boiling point. Gathering up Serbian, Venetian and Genoese fiscal and military support, in 1352, the junior co-emperor of the Byzantines would invade the territories of Kantakouzenos' holdings in Thrace, thus sparking a new round of civil war. John VI Kantakouzenos would once again call forth Ottoman support for his war effort. Now in his 70s, Orhan Gazi would entrust Ottoman military operations to his son Suleiman Pasha. A 10,000-strong Ottoman army, consisting of mostly cavalry, would be transported to Thrace, which would result in Kantakouzeni forces defeating the coalition army of John V during the Battle of Didymateiko by the end of the year. After the decisive battle, John VI Kantakouzenos would declare victory against the Palaiologos family, delegitimizing the junior emperor John V in favor of his son Matthew. However, crises would persist as Ottoman forces, led by Suleiman Pasha, began raiding the countryside of Thrace, occupying the fort of Tazimpi in the process. While negotiations for return of the fort were underway, on the night of March 2, 1354, the whole coastline of Thrace was devastated by a massive earthquake. Major towns in the region, like Gallipoli, saw their fortifications destroyed and their inhabitants dispersed. Seeing the magnitude of destruction from the Asian side of the Hellespont, Suleiman Pasha would quickly order the construction of rafts to cross over the channel and gathered a great crowd of Turkic families to get ready to repair and resettle the towns of the Gallipoli Peninsula. Before long, the first Ottoman families stepped foot into Europe, and the fort at Gallipoli was taken over by a substantial Ottoman garrison. Hearing the news that the Turks had crossed into Europe, in an act of desperation, Kantakouzenos offered Suleiman 4 times the amount of tribute that he'd previously proposed in previous negotiations for Simpi, and for the Ottoman withdrawal from the entire region. However, the Ottoman leader shot back, stating that his troops had merely taken over a number of places that had been deserted by their Greek inhabitants, and that Gallipoli had fallen to him by the will of God and not by force. Suleiman Pasha, who had by then taken over the Ottoman military after his father's steady retirement from public life, would not honour the formal alliance between Constantinople and Bursa, but instead opted for a more aggressive posture against Kantakouzenos in order to take advantage of the destabilizing Byzantine Empire. By the summer of the same year, Suleiman Pasha would begin his much-awaited military campaign in Byzantine Thrace, capturing the towns of Kesan, Tekirdağ and Kolu in rapid succession. Meanwhile, back in the Byzantine capital, Kantakouzenos' rule became increasingly unpopular due to the Byzantine policy of containing the Turks in Anatolia failing disastrously. By the end of the year, the more popular John V Palaiologos would be invited back to the capital to rule as co-emperor to Kantakouzenos, and before long, the latter would retire to a monastery in disgrace. Within 3 years, the last forces of Matthew Kantakouzenos would be defeated in Thrace, thus ending another round of Byzantine civil wars. With Osman and Orhan securing early victories against the Byzantines and capitalizing on the political divisions of their neighbors, the Ottoman Beylik had become one of the foremost rising stars of Anatolia. In the next episode, we will explore the Ottomans' sudden and deep expansion into the Balkans, and how Europe responded to these swift land acquisitions by the rising Muslim power. So make sure to subscribe and press the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing. It helps us immensely. Our videos would be impossible to produce without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links down in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.